Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Diarkland. I get the joy of looking after developer experience at Sentry, and today we are going to jump in and talk about mobile monitoring. And so the workshop we're going through today is mobile app monitoring. Platforms don't have to be noisy. We're going to focus a lot on how we get an actual mobile application up and monitored. We do these as really hands-on. The whole idea is to give you the code that you can pull down, run locally, and we kind of build it together and go through and discover stuff together. So it's a ton of fun. I'm joined by a couple other people. We'll do intros in a quick moment here. But as we start to get started, I'd love for everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat. I can't easily see how many people are actually here. So please feel free to jump in. Let us know where you're coming or you're calling in from. We love interactions. Like I said, I have a few people here who are geared up to help us and answer questions along the way. But yeah, definitely introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what you do, where you're from, all that good stuff. So today, the host, I introduced myself just now, Cody Yarkland. I look after developer experience, but I have a good friend here with me who is far smarter than I. Christoph, you want to do a little intro?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Christoph, and I work mainly on the React Native SDK, part of the mobile team in the Viennese office at Sentry. And I'm excited to be here, and I'll be hanging out in the background in the chat, helping you out with any questions you have, while Cody will guide you through the workshop.
Yeah, so if anything breaks along the way and I panic, I expect Christoph to jump in and fix it for me
Yeah,
and
yeah.
save the day. Awesome. So a couple of quick housekeeping before we get started. Definitely ask questions in the Q&A. We're watching the chat also, so if you want commentary, you just want to talk along, we welcome it. I see the chat over here. Just I always tell people when I'm looking forward here, I'm looking at my screen where I'm doing the code, but over here I'm looking at you all in the chat. So if you see me glancing over, it's just because I'm jumping in to see what's going on there. The recording will be provided afterwards, so we're going to send this out. It's going to be hosted. You'll be able to come back and watch it again. But please do the survey at the end. Believe it or not, we actually go through all of those survey results. We look at them and we try to figure out how we're going to tune things in future workshops off of them. So it's really helpful for us to know, kind of as a barometer of how things are going. All right, so we just did introduction housekeeping. We're going to jump into the workshop now, and then a Q&A at the end. Couple things as we get started. The website URL here is what we're going to use for the guide. Largely, I'm going to be talking through it, and so you can choose to follow along and run the code also. You can go back and visit this later and run it. All the stuff is up and running all the time. You can use your Sentry account and come back into it. So really easy to get using this long term, but feel free to jump in and use that if you want to. Definitely clone down the repo. There's a couple steps in there that take a little bit of time. If you didn't go through the setup instructions for things like Xcode and all of that, you're probably not going to get through on this call. It takes a brutal time to get installed along with the iOS simulator. But if not, you can just watch me fumble through it and mess it up along the way. So you'll be fine to spectate and make fun of me in the chat, which I encourage jokes in the chat. So that said, we got a lot of stuff we're going to go through, and so I just want to get right into it. Again, if you have questions, we love interactions. These are so much more fun when people are talking back and forth and engaging. So please jump in, ask questions along the way, even if it's on different topics like adjacent to this. We want to make sure you're getting all that you can out of this. So here's our workshop guide, the guide that we're going to use to go through. So you want to have this up the whole time. I'm also signed in on Sentry inside of my own environment. We're going to use a different project than this one. This is a different project right now. But you want to make sure you've signed up for your Sentry account. You have everything going there and everything's all good. I'm inside of my application code. So if I dump this, we can see this is all the code for the actual workshop here. So all this stuff is set up. We're good to go and get started. So I'm going to jump back into the guide now. Couple things that we'll want to make sure we do. Obviously, we have it downloaded locally. The steps here should be able to be copied and pasted right into your terminal. So make sure you've cloned down, make sure you've pulled it down. And right out of the gate, I would typically run this, but I'm going to hold off until I go and install Sentry, and then I'm going to run this while I give a little speechy speech because this takes a long time to run because this does the actual compile operations. So we're going to skip the rest of this for now. We're going to go into this configuring Sentry section, and we're going to go right into getting started with the SDK. Now, what's really cool about React Native in this case for us is we support the Sentry Wizard here. And what the Sentry Wizard does is goes through and scaffolds out a bunch of the different configs you need. And so there's a lot of stuff you don't have to do manually when you use the wizard. So that's great. I'm going to grab that, hop back into my terminal, and I'll come in and drop that command in. Now, again, this is going to take us through all the different config options for setting this up. I have a bunch of files that haven't been committed. It's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and just say continue anyways. And it's going to prompt me for which Sentry environment I'm using. So I'll say Sentry SaaS. I have an account already. It's going to bring up my environment and I can choose from different projects. Now we're going to live dangerous here. The safe route would be to go to the one I've been using as I've been building out this workshop and testing it out. I'm going to create a whole new project entirely though. And we're going to go unborked workshop day just because of today. Actually, we'll just go unborked workshop. I'm going to choose my team. So in Sentry, you can have different teams that manage different projects. So it's just a scoping exercise. I'm going to use my build with code one, and I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And this is going to go create that project inside of Sentry and then bring all those configs back into my application. So when I switch back in, it's moved down, and it's going to prompt me for a couple of different things inside of Sentry's config. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and enable session replay, and we're not going to turn on the user feedback widget. User feedback's super cool. It's one of my favorite features. It doesn't get nearly as much attention as it deserves. But what it lets you do is if there's like a problem inside your application, it'll bring up a dialog that you can fill out and drop information into, or you can run it on your website normally and use it to give feedback on what you're seeing inside of the application. We use it inside of Sentry. So if you go in, you click on any of the send feedback options, that is the user feedback widget. And we collect that. It creates an issue inside of Sentry. You can watch a replay. You get all the same stuff that you get out of Sentry normally by using that. So it's pretty cool. Just not something we're going to do inside of this workshop. Now I'm going to skip this one for now. This would do a pod install, so it would go and install all of the different components for React Native. I'm going to skip it for now and just complete the actual wizard. So in this case, it's giving me an option to go and set up a test error. We already know our application's broken. I built it to be broken for you all, so we can skip this. I'm just going to say yes and lie to it. And that sets up the whole project. Now, before we go anywhere else, because this takes a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and do npx expo run iOS. Now, Expo is great. Expo does a lot of really, really good work for scaffolding out React Native projects and gets them up and running really fast. If you wanted to build this application for real, I would definitely use like expo.dev. They host a ton of different tooling on there to be able to go and build applications and get them shipped out to devices. It's super low friction. Huge fan of what Expo does. It's not a sponsored statement. I just like Expo a lot. So we'll go and run this, and it's going to start doing the compile operation. So it's going to take the whole build and start to build it as a native build for the simulator. And we need that because there's a bunch of things inside of Sentry that only run on like a real build and won't necessarily run on on the development build that Expo can do kind of on the fly. So this is going to go and run, and while this runs, we're going to jump in and explore a few other things inside of Sentry while this takes its time to come up and running. So I'm going to refresh my Sentry window and I can go down into that project that we created. So I typed in unborked. And we can see that unborked 1M down here that was created. So it's an empty project, nothing set up inside of it yet. I want to spend a few minutes talking about alerts. Oh, look how fast it came up. Christoph and I were talking about how unpredictable it is for it to build fast, but this one fired up real fast. So app is up and running now. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and try to sign in real quick just to throw that first error. That failed. And in a few moments, this will show up inside a Sentry. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit. Oh, look at that. Event was received. Before I could even finish my statement, it was already pulled in. So now when we go in, I can see that first error. I'll go back to my issue view. We'll go down to unborked workshop 1M. There's that issue 22 seconds ago. So here's what's like kind of crazy. I've talked for this started 10 minutes ago. We probably did what, 7 minutes of intro. So in the first 3 minutes, we've already gotten our first issues coming through inside of an application that didn't have Sentry set up on it. So it's kind of cool to see how fast you can get like actually configured and have it being useful. And when we come in here now, we can see a ton of different information that we'll start to pick through overall. So, real quick, before I go there, though, I want to get back to the alerts thing that I keep ranting on over and over again. We'll go into this alert screen here. And this, just so you know, we went through all of the settings already inside of the guide. We blew through this pretty fast. Um, we're going to come back up here to do tracing in a few, but we're starting to look at this tuning alert section real quick. Uh, the thing about Sentry that's really useful is the different ways that it can bring you context and the different configuration options you have around how issues are created and how you're notified on them. And so we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on creating alerts later on. But what I wanted to highlight here is there's a ton of different ways that you can actually receive that context and receive notification of what's happening in your environment. If you really just care about errors and things breaking inside of an application, you can get different notifications based on error. If you want to understand more about like user impact and how your users are experiencing Sentry, sessions are a great way to look at that and how which ones are having crash experiences, how users are performing. The performance ones are really useful because you can come in here, you can do like throughput. So if you want to say an amount of requests per time frame, things drop below there, right? So if you have a site that's consistently has 1,000 logins an hour, being able to build an alert around if that drops down to 50% of that value or something like that, being able to notify if that is super useful. So again, there's a ton of different options in here for alerting, and a huge part of the webinar is all about making environments less noisy. It's not as convenient when you have and every time you get an error message or every time you get an error, you're getting the email or getting a notification around that. When I have that happen in my environments, I end up just discarding most of them because it's just so noisy that it's not useful. We want to make sure that the errors that we're receiving, the important ones, are notifying us in the right way. And so being able to come in and configure alerting and set up fingerprinting to control like how issues are grouped is really important. So I'll touch on that in a minute, but I want to get back into the setup for a few. So we went through through the wizard already. We've gotten everything set up. We saw our issue come through, so things are good there. Uh, the guide will talk to you about what things are configured inside of the code base. So let's go take a look at that real fast. We'll hop into cursor here, and I'm in my layout.tsx right now for my actual application. This is the initialization for Sentry that gets brought in, and this is like the default configuration based on what I selected in the guide. We're going to make some tuning and adjustments to this, but this is a huge part of like the overall configuration, along with a few other files along the way. But the bulk of what we interact with often is inside of this Sentry initialization here. And so in here, we're telling it to send default PII. We're telling it to sample session replay down to 10%. So 10% of sessions that hit will get a replay attached to them. We're going to bump this up in a few. But this is how you can control how often you receive replays inside of an environment. I get this question a lot where someone says, "Hey, I set up Sentry and I'm not seeing any replays come through." And then when we go and check out the sample rate, it's at the default still of 0.1. So it's 1 in every 10 tries, roughly. So a lot of times for testing and dev environments, we'll bump this up a little bit so you can see it. But just know that you will consume more of like your replay quota. So it's a little bit of a balancing act there. We capture 100% of replays every time there's an error. So whenever there's an error, we want to keep the replay for that. And then we've got that mobile replay integration. What's really cool about how Sentry approaches mobile is we've done a lot of stuff to really focus on that mobile experience. So the replay is not just your normal website replay that you would expect to see. It's actually tuned for mobile. So it's a real capture from how that mobile device is seeing it. It's like you don't have to go and dig up that random iPhone 8 that somebody has and is having a problem with. You can just watch the replay and see how it was being experienced. The wizard also comes in and wraps the whole application in the Sentry wrap, which lets us have all of the different controls that we've talked about so far. So super useful for that. So I'll hop back into the guide. And what we're going to do now is we're going to turn on tracing because we're going to use that throughout the whole workshop overall. And tracing is just super useful to understand the communication flow of requests throughout your application. Now, it's pretty basic inside of this project because we only have just the application standalone. But tracing really starts to shine when you get into like distributed scenarios where you have your mobile app that's connecting to an API on the back end, and that API is maybe connecting down to a database, and you can watch that connection flow move all the way through. I see William Johnson asking about the dot wrap. So what .wrap does is it wraps the entire application in Sentry so that we're able to monitor things like traces. We're able to capture exceptions off of it. So it's just the thing kind of watching over the whole project overall. A lot of the other frameworks do this in just different ways. It's not always like a true like .wrap statement, but it's not a lot different really than having it like framed inside of a context that spans over into application. On the mobile device, though, we want it to wrap around the entire app overall. Lets it be in there as early as possible also, so you're getting monitoring really quickly. So we're going to go ahead and bring in tracing now. We'll go into our code base and we're going to start bringing in a few different things. Now, tracing on mobile is a little bit different. We have to bring in a couple of additional configurations just to be able to manage things like navigation, especially with things like Expo Router. So we're going to bring in the use navigation container reference. We'll add that in up top here. Give ourselves a couple of spots. We'll bring in this chunk of code for here for the native integration or the navigation integration. And then we can bring that into our Sentry integrations overall. We'll turn on our traces sample rate to 1.0. So similar to what I talked about with the sample rates for the others, this tells us how often we're going to be able to keep a trace. So we want to have that 1.0 during practice here. And now I could just save this. Oh, I got to do one more thing down here. Bring in the stuff to actually manage the navigation and actually track that inside of spans. So I'll do that real fast. Boom. Cool. So I could just save this here, and in the guide, I have you save it here and continue forward. But since we're already coming in making edits, I'm going to do the next section also, which is tuning the replays a little bit also. But what we've done here now is we've set up all of tracing inside of the application, but we haven't started configuring any like custom spans or anything to manage and monitor like performance of individual functions yet. Right now, all we've done is really the default spans inside of the environment. So you'll get a lot of stuff around like application load times and different screen load times, but there's more we're going to do throughout the exercise. And so we'll come in here and we're going to turn on. We already turned on our trace sample rate. We're going to come in and we're going to make some adjustments to the mobile replay integration. Now we do this by default. We mask all text and block all media because we don't want you to accidentally expose too much information to your replays where people can go in and actually see like what people are typing in inside of the applications. But for demo purposes and for workshop, it's a little nicer to be able to have that masking turned off so you can see a clear view of what the replays look like. So I'm going to come in and apply these configs into the mobile replay here. So we'll add this. Drop those in. Oh, did I do that wrong? I did do that wrong because I added the curly braces and those aren't needed. Or are they? We should just copy and paste the command instead.
It's an object. You can add the curly braces like as you had them. It was
Oh,
looking good. Yeah.
so I should have had those. There we go.
Yeah.
I don't actually need the block all media anyways. Well, I'm curious why it's erroring out right now.
I think so. Local media works for our web replays, and for the mobile replays, we have
Ah.
block all images and block all vectors. I hope the text editor will help you. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Not block, but mask.
Oh,
If you
mask
just
all.
write M, it should. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Mask images, mask vectors.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Christoph.
That,
See, I break things.
no worries. That's why we are here.
Oops, it auto completed wrong.
That was just AI hallucinating. Yep.
Right.
Again, but almost there.
There we go.
Yeah, that's
Got it.
looking perfect.
Cool. Thanks. Cool. So that's all set. Now we're also going to bump up that sample rate to 1.0 also. So we'll come up here. We'll bump this up to 1 instead. And we will save this and it'll automatically refresh the application with that. And so those configs are in place now. So as we go through and run through the rest of the workshop, these will actually work. So we should be able to see everything inside of replays. It's not going to impact previous replays. It's only going to impact new replays that are captured. But we are all good there. So I'll need to make that change in the guide afterwards. Now, I've seen a few times where you have to restart it. I'm gonna go ahead and just leave it alone. I think it'll run fine without restarting. But if you start seeing like inconsistent behavior, you're not seeing your replays come through, you're not seeing configs. Sometimes you do need to refresh the whole thing. So we'll give it another try real quick just to watch this error fly. So that happened there. We'll go back into Sentry, back into our issues view. Give it a quick refresh to see. Come on, little fella. There we go. There's our new issue coming through. And let's go see if we have a new replay of our app yet. Not yet. So sometimes it takes a few for replays to start coming back in again after making that change. But it should show up in a few moments here. But again, this is what that mobile replay looks like. You can see the masking is still in place in here, so we're not seeing any of that. And since I had it up and running in the background, it was capturing that the whole time. But you could see the actual navigations as I started clicking through the app. It's a little hard to tell only because of the masking, but you can see those errors starting to show up. And when we look at the replay, we can see exactly that error that's coming through. And if I click into this, it'll take us into the actual application where we can see the replay itself, or we can see the whole issue itself. And so now we're in our issue. We're about to cruise forward into the actual debugging. But I want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing inside of like a Sentry issue, just at a high level. So we focus a lot on making sure that a lot of context is coming through to you. And when we talk about context, we're talking about all the different things that are really important inside of your application that are especially useful for like debugging or fixing problems. So I can see like what device is coming through. So my simulator is a Pro or iPhone 16 Pro Max. I can see software version coming through. I can see a stack trace that shows me where in the code the problem is. We're going to use that in a few minutes here. One of my favorite things is we have Seer over here. Seer's our AI agent, and what Seer will do is take all this context, feed it into AI alongside your code base and your application, and actually figure out what's wrong and give you a root cause, and then also give you a chance to fix it if you want to. So this is super useful for figuring out what's going on inside your application. So you can come in and tell it to find a root cause. It's in beta right now. We're gonna be shipping it pretty soon though. We can see the amount of events that come through, as well as the amount of users who are impacted by this one. This one's super useful for me because it makes it really easy to understand like the wide range or the impact radius of a problem inside of an environment. We scroll down, we can see that replay. We can see the breadcrumbs that led to that issue. So when I think of breadcrumbs, think of that like the individual interactions that lead up to something. Now, in this case, things are being filtered, and a lot of this is being filtered because it thinks it's part of like secure information. So this was part of a login operation. So it's filtering out some of those individual actions there just to protect the PII data. You can come in and turn this off. It's not really recommended, but there are some cases where it makes sense. It's available inside of the privacy settings to just turn off scrubbing. But that's why these are showing up as filtered. We can see the traces down here. If I hop into Trace Explorer, we can see we're getting all of those new traces in, right? They started coming in just a little bit ago. So we got the mount operation here. If I come into this, we can see the tree overall, all the interactions, and there's that error when it tried to log in. So this represents a trace is the entirety of like an action overall, and then the spans are the individual actions inside of that. So the trace is the session and the interactions, and these are all individual items that have happened along the way as part of that, as part of you using or your users using that application, I should say. So cool. This is all set. Now we've only received kind of one issue here or one alert, and really for two events. But in larger environments, you imagine if we had distributed this to everybody, all of you would be hitting it, and I'd be getting a ton of these. And so being able to come in and start to adjust out alerts is pretty useful in that case. So we'll come in here. And this is the default notification, the default alert that's available. And so when when an event is captured, we'll go in and edit this so we can read fully. When an event is captured by Sentry and any of the following happens, these are all conditions, right? So if any of these happen, that's going to be the when that's going to start the fire or start the alert firing. When Sentry marks a new issue as high priority, so breaks inside of an environment, errors inside of an environment all get marked as high priority. And then an existing issue is high priority, meaning something that was already inside of the environment but is starting to get new events coming in. Issues are a parent of events. Like all of the events, events would be like errors that are happening inside of your application. So that SSO problem we're having, that's an event that gets sent in, but Sentry captures that as an issue, and issues can have many events inside of it. So every one of your users hitting that problem would be individual events as part of that parent issue. Scrolling down, we can say if there's no filters on here, if we wanted to filter out certain amounts, we could use that here. Then perform this action. We're sending notifications out. So again, all this is saying is when an event happens, send an email notification on it. But you can see how this would get pretty noisy pretty fast, where every time an event comes through that's part of an issue, you're getting a new notification on it. We could come in and start playing with new alerts as part of this, and we do that as part of the walkthrough. We come in and create a new alert. We could say maybe on the number of errors coming through or individual users experiencing those errors. We'll play with one on issues right now. We'll come in and set conditions. And it's pretty straightforward to come in and start adding to this. By default, we have a new issue is created, but if we hit this drop down here, there's a lot of different configuration options here. I like issue frequency because there might be times where every so often we might have a login problem or an issue, but I only want to know if it's a certain amount of these coming through. So I could come in and say number of events is more than value and interval. So if I said more than 10 events in 1 minute. That would feel a lot more concerning than just one per hour, the individual issue that pops up here and there. There are times where like I have a notification drop on a problem inside of my application because they're running maintenance or they're rebooting part of that environment. And so being able to like tune this little bit is a huge part of how you make this a little bit more actionable and a little make sure that the notifications you're getting are a lot more understandable and digestible. Because again, like if I'm getting a ton of alerts all day for like the flaky services inside of my environment, I'm much more likely to just start disregarding those and not engaging in them because it's just noise inside of the environment. Uh, Coming in here and tuning is definitely something I would recommend everyone do, right? Like one of the first things inside of their environment, and especially as they start seeing their environments grow in size, coming in here and keeping tuning it. Another thing to be able to do is come in and tune this on environment because we're doing these local development builds. All we have is one development environment, but I might have these local builds as development, but then switch it to prod when I ship it out to people. And obviously, you'd want very different notification posture around those two things. In dev, you might not need any notifications. You might just want to watch it inside of the system. But in prod, you would certainly want to know when users are having an impact or being impacted. So, configuring this here, and then obviously I can switch projects here as much as I want to also. We get a nice preview of what that alert would look like, how often it should happen for each one. So, for example, if you want it to be able to happen every 5 minutes, it'll give you a new issue. You can do that. But then we can also get down to actually naming this and what team we want it to go out to. One of the options inside of here, if we go down, then perform these actions, we can do like individual notifications. I can automatically create linear issues off of this. This is one that I use a lot inside of my environment. So when there's a problem, having it automatically go create in linear. We can have it create GitHub issues automatically. So there's a lot of stuff we can do as like when we get these notifications, go do a thing that can kick off other automations in a really useful way. So love that. That is tuning alerts, really an important thing, especially when you want to make sure like the environments you're working in are having like good posture and good notification standards. So we've done a lot of talking about stuff next to code. Let's go in and start actually repairing something and fixing something that's broken now. So the guide takes you through what to actually do, but it's a little bit more fun if we use Sentry in the way that it's supposed to be used to debug this. And so I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to head right down to the stack trace. And we can see the stack trace is telling me where inside of my application code this problem's happening. Now, I haven't set up code mappings yet, but I can see inside of that logins.tsx, there's a handle login, and that error is throwing right here. So let's go check that out and see what it says in the code. So go into logins. And if we go to handle login, this is the function right here. We can see I have some commented code out here where the problems are actually happening. And so it makes it really easy for in a workshop for you to come in and fix it. But if I did not have this, I would know this function had the problem in it. And it makes it really easy for me to dig into and find. I think like that's one of the big strengths of Sentry is really shortening the amount of time it takes to go and fix a problem inside of your environment. Using source maps is really, really good way for that. So there's a couple things that are broken in here. We're not sending the right password over overall. So I can come in, I'll go ahead and just comment out these items. You should do this inside of your application too. And we'll come in and we'll uncomment the part that is working. So feeding in the username and password, this is the most janky single sign-on that's ever existed, but it gets the job done. So now if I come in and do sign in with SSO, everything should fire up. I'm inside of the application now. Everything is available. Let's hop back into Sentry and scroll down a little bit. We didn't get an updated replay for this, but we can see where that problem was actually happening. So again, I don't have to have the device in front of me. I can watch a replay for the user having it. I can see the breadcrumbs. I can see trace preview. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for just real quick to show all of this. We get a ton of additional context around the user, right? So what OS are they on? What version? Uh, if the device is rooted or not. Takes me back to high school and college. What the release version is. This is really helpful for release health when you start to measure that. The actual user impacted, what SDK and environment they're on. So there's a ton of information that comes from this. Sorry, SDK is down here. What SDK and version they're on. There's a ton of information that comes out of this just to make it a lot easier to troubleshoot and debug problems in an environment. So cool. We are cruising right along. We have successfully fixed our SSO, which was the easiest fix ever because of commented code. Now we can go back into the application and we'll try to add something to the cart and we can watch us get another crash as it starts trying to add. And if I jump in here, it's failing too. So we're having another set of crashes. If I come in to Sentry again, in a few moments, we'll see those issues start to come through. These are new errors that'll be showing up inside of the app. There we go. So we have these new ones. Add to cart failed. If we jump in, we can scroll through and see where exactly in that's coming. Now we don't have a replay yet; it's just still loading up. It takes a little bit for the replays to show up. They have to render in the background a little bit, but those will show up eventually inside of this issue. So we'll go back in here though, and we can start looking around again, similar to what we did before. So we can see handle cart in this cart utilities is having a bit of a problem. What we're going to do in this case is use tracing to debug this. So tracing will let us watch the communication flow throughout an application, and we can actually see what properties are being passed along and understand if there's something being missed along the way. And so we'll head back into our guide. We'll go into troubleshooting a store cart with tracing. We saw the issue come through. And so now we're going to bring in custom spans into our code. And so custom spans let us wrap different actions inside of an application in these spans that we can use for better troubleshooting later on. You can copy this whole block up here if you want to, but I usually recommend copying just the individual sections and bringing them in just because there's some things that can get lost along the way. So I'm going to head into this cartutils.js file. We'll go back in here, cartutils.ts, sorry, .ts. Got to fix that in the guide too. And we have this handle cart function here. There's a couple of other things that we need to do first, though. We need to the prepare product for cart function. There that is. So there's prepare product for cart. We're going to grab this whole block down here. And we're going to replace that with this. Now it's going to throw some errors because we haven't imported Sentry yet. So we'll come up here, get the auto import good. And so this is going to do a custom span around this request right now. So when I save this and try to load up again, it'll do a span around it. But then I'm also going to update the handle add to cart with a custom span around it also. So these are two individual spans that are part of an overall trace that'll be tracked. And there's a couple of things happening inside of here that are worth pointing out. We'll zoom in a little bit real quick. I'm setting a few attributes. So these are properties that live on the span that I can use for troubleshooting. So obviously how many of a thing we're buying, what the product IDs are, the category for it, what the operation taking place is. As we scroll down, we can see what the ID is, if it's missing the SKU or not. And as we go through, these would be really useful for doing the debugging. So we'll come in here. We're going to find this handle add to cart. We'll copy this whole thing and replace it. We're getting an error somewhere. I needed to update that from the guide also. So that should be all set now. Cool, cool, cool. So now when we go back into the application and we'll refresh the whole thing. Our single sign-on works like we wanted to. We're going to get another error when this runs. So you can see it's throwing some errors down below. But now if I go into our trace explorer, I'll see these traces start showing up inside of the application in a few moments. Sometimes takes just a couple. There we go. So we added a few of these. If we go back in and look at our actual code, we can see we added one named prepare for cart. We added another one named handle add to cart. Both of these are spans that are available for debugging now. So we'll go into this prepare for cart one, and we can see the flow of this throughout the application. Now I clicked it a bunch of times, so we get the message pop up a ton, but we can see everywhere where it's failing inside. And if we go in, we can see those properties that we brought in into this span specific information over here. I'll zoom in a little bit, and I'll zoom back out afterwards. But we can see all those properties that we brought in are here. Now, from a debugging standpoint, this becomes super useful long term because, like, for example, I can see it's missing the skew here. Now, I wouldn't know that right away, but as I go through, we start seeing that it's missing necessary information for finishing up actual transactions. So cool. Our spans are working. We're tracking those now. I can create alerts off of these, right? So if I wanted to, I could look at the properties on these and create alerts that would fire whenever a certain span and certain properties came through. So it makes it really easy to start building out like monitoring around the metrics that really matter to you. We oftentimes call these kind of like the critical experiences for people, right? If I'm running a store, I probably care a lot about things like transactions per day or transactions per hour. And if those transactions start to drop, I'd probably want to know about that. I can have these as properties on the spans coming through, monitor those, and if things start to drop, actually do notifications off it. I can show it on dashboards. And so you'll hear us talk a lot about like the idea of critical experiences. And really what that is, hey, every application has a set of things that you really care about inside of it. If it's a store, it's purchases being made, it's things being added to cart. If it's an airline, it's flight tickets being purchased or travel being booked, right? Like all of these are different metrics that really matter to people, and using spans and like custom properties on spans and span metrics let you create really good tracking mechanisms around this stuff. So we've gone in, we've added our spans to these. We're good to go here. I just talked a little bit through analyzing out those the traces inside of Sentry and how you can use those. And those are all set. I see Will in chat is asking for links to the docs about custom spans. If somebody could drop those, that would be super useful. So in here, we go through and we talk about what's actually going wrong inside of the code. So the handle add to cart function starts, it calls prepare product for cart. It's returned, but it's missing the SKU property. And then it tries to add it, but it fails because the SKU is missing. And so if we look through the span properties, we can see that those things end up being true. And so what we need to do is we need to fix that inside of the actual application code. So we'll come down here to fixing the issue. Once again, we had all this commented out, so it makes it really easy for you in the workshop to come in and play with it and make these changes yourself. But what we can do is instead of returning just this product here empty, we'll go ahead and flip this and we'll return everything fully configured. And so now we're going to return the product, but we're also going to attach the SKU to it. We're then going to set the attributes on that custom span with this, and then return that. And so while Lazar, thank you for sharing the docs out, just shared the docs, let's talk through what this custom span actually looks like. This is pretty consistent amongst a bunch of our different SDKs. The convention might change slightly, but like especially in like the JavaScript based one, start span happens a lot. what we're doing here is start span becomes a wrapper around things you're calling inside of your application. So we do it similar to how we did the dot wrap at the beginning of the module overall for setting up Sentry. We're starting a span around different functions. I love this in like APIs, for example. If I'm working on a backend and I want to wrap an entire API call in this, you get a ton of telemetry out of how that API is performing by doing that. So this is super nice to do. Definitely use these to add spans around like different actions inside of your applications. Then, once you have that in place, you can start adding attributes in. So these can all be calculated off of different things, right? These are coming in from the product that is calling this function. And so I can add all of these as attributes onto it. You can calculate them during if you wanted to. So you can do things like calculating out the performance of an API call. I do these inside of like databases. I'll do certain queries or certain results that I want to be able to look at later on. I do it inside of LLMs a lot when I want to capture like the inbound prompt and the outbound responses. These are all things we're doing a lot of work to make that a lot better and more native. But these are all like really good use cases for using custom metrics and custom spans. So this is all set up now. I fixed that problem in theory. We'll go back in and test out the application again now. Let's come in and hit plus. We can see things getting added to the cart. We come in here. We can proceed to check out. We'll go ahead and do Apple Pay. We'll place our order. And we're getting our next error. Wouldn't you know it? Plot twist. More problems inside of the application. Who would have ever thought? So we're still having those problems inside the application. We've got one more exercise to go through now, and that's fixing out the checkout flow. And we're going to use tracing for that one also. But we were able to use tracing in this case to watch how the application was working and how we were trying to pass items into the cart in the first place. We were able to see the different properties that were missing and how we could use tracing to be able to manage that. It's a great way to actually get a lot more information about the flow through an application. Big fan of using tracing for that. So now we'll go in and we'll start working on using tracing inside of this checkout flow instead. So when we go in, we had that error pop up. We'll go back into Sentry now. We should see another new error. Yep. So we've got Apple Pay transaction failed. Shipping address information is missing or invalid. We did capture a replay on this one pretty fast. So now you'll see how it's no longer masked. Let's make this bigger. Oops, that was not what I wanted to do. Oh, curse the zoom window. It's blocking the play button. So you can see me go through and click that and hit checkout, and we can actually read the text now because all of the unmasking was done. So this is what we did in that very, very first step where we pulled this out. So we can go in, we can see what's going on inside of here. We see where we think the problem is in the actual code. Shipping address is invalid. It's in the payment service, especially specifically in the process Apple Pay payment section. We're going to add some spans to make this a little bit easier to debug. So we'll come in and we'll go into that payment service and we're going to start bringing this in. So we'll grab this function, the static async process payment. There's a lot to copy here. So we'll go process payment, we'll pop back in. Process payment, oops. Payment service, words are hard. Cool. And it's process payment. So we'll copy and paste over this. Oops, I went way too far. There we go. Just that amount. We're getting those errors again because we haven't imported Sentry yet. So we'll come up here and import Sentry. Now let's talk through a little bit about what this huge block of code that I just pasted actually does. It's no fun when people just paste code and don't explain what's happening. So process payment goes through and makes the actual payment inside of our application. We go through and we wrap that whole function in a span, right? We talked about that last time. Wrapping in a span lets us see the performance of that function. We give it a name. We grab the actual span and we add some properties to it that we can use for troubleshooting and more information later. We create a fake little delay because it just plays well in a workshop. We're pulling in the payment method here. We're setting a span attributes if that payment method is missing, right? So if there's no payment method, we fire off another set of attributes that'll tell us that. Otherwise, we let it move forward. We're setting attributes for the payment method type and name, just grabbing those from the request overall and pulling them through. And then we go in and we process payments based on the type. So if it's a card, PayPal, or Apple Pay. Now we've also created a span below this one, right? So a child span in this case, around the processing of the Apple Pay payment. And so this one is actually controlling the thing that actually goes and makes the real payment. So process Apple Pay payment, address ID, and the total cost. And that function is further down inside of the application. So that's all set there. Now we're going to update the Apple Pay processing. So we'll grab this whole function here, all the way down with the commented out code. Process Apple Pay payment. We'll go search, process Apple Pay payment. We want the real function. There we go. There's that. Similar to before, we'll go and grab that whole block and replace it. What did we break inside of here? An argument for paired span. Now it's ready to bring back the child span that we removed earlier. So cool, that's in place now. And so now when we go and run this, we will get much better trace information off of it. So we'll go back into the app, keep opening the Zoom window for no good reason. We'll refresh the whole thing. Sign back again, plus, 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 plus. Check out. And we get our error. But as part of that, we're now going to get all the spans that are associated with that now also. And so those take a few to show up. There we go. Fetch address for Apple Pay, process payments. So both of those came in really, really fast. We can see everything that's happening in here. If we go in, this is still loading up everything. So it's just taking a few to finish pulling everything together. We come in, see all this information. There we go. Just took a few. Once again, we can see the detail down here for troubleshooting in the span specific data. The information it's pulling in, we can see that payment error. Transaction failed because shipping address information is invalid or incomplete. So all of these are like messages that we can feed in from different parts of our application into it. So we'll head back. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. That is not either. There we go. So we go through and we talk a little bit about the Trace Explorer, which I already showed. We talk through analyzing that trace up. We're running a little low on time, so I'm going to breeze through the rest of this here. We're going to come in and we're going to fix the problems with the actual application. Now, all we were doing is not passing in the actual shipping information. And so what this fix actually does, that we caught inside of the traces, is fix that problem. And so we'll come down, we'll find the process Apple Pay payment again. And we could come in and just comment these out and uncomment the broke or the fixed parts, but what we'll do is we'll just replace it again with the whole thing. And now when we save this and we run through it, oh, it didn't work. Maybe we will have to just uncomment the code instead of pasting the whole thing. Oh, there it goes. Worked successfully. So order confirmation successful. So now with that done, it goes through, captures the whole thing, captures the traces for it, even with the success, and we'll see a different set of messages on the successful trace that just came through. Those just haven't been pulled in yet. Now, before we start to wrap up, there's a few things that we didn't like dive into as part of the overall workshop. We've talked a lot about like function performance and how we look at these individual spans. There's another side of tracing, which is this idea of profiling. Profiling is something that we just released continuous profiling, so it's not in the React Native SDK yet, but it's coming soon. And what the profiling lets you do is get down to an individual function level how performance is working, and so how things are performing on every function inside of your application. So if you had a specific call inside of that API route or inside of an API, you could measure how that's performing. If you had database calls going out, you could measure those individual performance and capture more information around that. This is super important, especially on mobile devices where like performance is a lot more sensitive. And so we just again did a big refresh on how profiling works. So I'd highly encourage checking that out. Another area that I really like is digging into like the insights tabs and coming into like mobile here and being able to dig into how it's performing on an actual mobile device. We get a ton of information out of here, right? So I can see things like transactions per minute, how often people are using it. I can see the P50 duration or any of those configuration options. So see how long it takes like different routes on to load on average or different performance. We have no frozen frames on our application, but if we had like different parts of the app that were freezing up, we could capture them here and see them here. So there's a ton of information that comes in that's really useful for the mobile specific dashboards. I didn't set up mobile vitals that much, but we can see things like from a mobile web vital standpoint, like how is the app actually performing? In my case, like how long did it take to go from zero to running? It's a little bit misleading on like or when I'm running inside of the simulator on the Mac here because there's just a lot of things that are different. This becomes really useful when it's actually devices in people's hands. We can come in and see more information on the network requests if I had that configured. We could come in and see individual user sessions. I didn't configure any of these in this workshop just because of time constraints, but we're doing a lot of work around making sure we have these really good mobile specific dashboards that give a lot of information that are really tuned around like your use case. And so in this case, like there's a ton you get out of the mobile dashboards that'll tell you around how people are actually performing or how people's devices are performing with your application. Another thing that we've spent a lot of energy on is some of like the releases information. So like how we look at new releases coming into an environment overall. Now I only have one because I just built this as application 1.0. But think about in a mobile world where you're releasing like a new version potentially every week and not everyone is updating. You might say 1.0 has a 40% crash rate, which is huge. But then as you roll out, 1.1, you could chart and see that crash rate reduce down. And so again, like all of this context becomes really useful for understanding how your applications are performing inside of environments and how your users are experiencing them. And so like all we're doing inside of Sentry is really tuned around making sure that you're getting information that you can use to help like make your application experience better for users. So the releases view is great for like understanding on a per release basis, how is that experience going and how can I make it better? You can see things like errors that are tied to specific releases, right? If you fix this error inside of release 1.1 and it's no longer there, all the fixes like we did in this workshop, for example, I could push those up as a new release version to 1.1 and none of these will show up anymore and it'll be a much more stable build. We can scroll through, change like different charts that we want to see information on here. Really useful again for just comparing between different versions. And if we had the Git integration set up, we could actually see what's being changed inside of it each time. And so again, it's really useful for being able to explore out on a per version basis how things are performing, especially again in mobile where there's so many different versions out in the wild. Last thing I'll say before we start to cruise out, I just want to pop back in. So we got a bunch more replays through. I wanted to show one. We can see ones that like when they're very active with errors. So this one down here had a lot. This one had two. These ones all should be unmasked now, and so we can see, yeah, so we can see how the application looks as someone clicks through the whole thing, right, and where those errors happen. So mobile replays are incredibly useful, somewhat new feature. Like, it's been a few months now, but just crazy useful for debugging environments for with users. Cool. So as we wrap up, we talked through getting alerts configured, making those environments a lot quieter, how to tune those just based on getting the most information, most valuable information out at a time. We started debugging with just the baseline of Sentry, how we look at error, stack traces, mobile replays. We went in and dug into tracing, brought tracing in, set up custom spans and some of the metrics that matter, those critical experiences, and being able to pull those in and actually be able to do searches off of them and use them for debugging. We then kind of stepped up the tracing into a little bit more deeper, went into child spans and how those relate to each other and built more metrics off of it. So again, got a lot out of this one. This was a pretty fast workshop overall. I hope everyone, or at least some people, got to go hands-on with it and try out the actual application itself. It was a labor of love, lot of fun to build out. But I think we have about 6 minutes left. Christoph and I are available for any questions you might have. I saw Christoph jumping off in chat a lot, so I think we answered a ton along the way. I'm not seeing any in the Q&A tab. Do we have any other questions coming through? And if you're brave, you're welcome to come off of mute and ask them too if you want to. Otherwise, we're watching chat now. While we're waiting for any questions to come through. Actually, we got William Johnson asking about why you'd want to use a custom span. A couple of different reasons. One, we do auto instrument spans a lot. So if I go into the Trace Explorer view and we bring that back up, we can see a whole lot of spans that are coming through just by default inside of here. But a lot of times for the more higher trafficked environments, there's a lot of spans in there that you might not know the properties of inherently. So you can create custom spans to make them more searchable, right? So in this case, like I could come up here and I could grab just this name if I knew that function name, and I can search this and it's going to bring those up. So it makes them a lot more discoverable. But the big use case is when you want to start attaching additional properties and make them a lot easier to search and easier to parse out and debug with. Like so, adding additional information to them, adding additional data, again, makes it more searchable, makes it easier to query off of, makes it easier to build alerts and reports off of, helps with debugging, especially when you want to be able to hand over like management of environment to somebody else. Like if you joined the team and I said, hey, this is our application. Here are the spans that matter inside of it. I gave you like a run book that you could go in and say, cool, if I'm ever debugging, I need to be able to go and look this. That's super helpful. Oh yeah, good call, Carlos. Thanks for that. Yeah, you can see things like the P50, P90 based on those. We do aggregations off of the values that are in here, right? So like we can come in and pull these individual values out and render those in the Trace Explorer and see what the P50. So in the case of a store, you could pull the P50 for total purchase cost if you had that tracked as a custom property, and you could start to chart that out and visualize that here and aggregate that here. So there's a lot of things you can do with those with custom spans that are just a lot more flexible than the default ones. You can add those. You can add properties to an existing span, but you're gonna have to know exactly what span has those, and most people aren't gonna know that just off the top of their head. It's really useful to have a custom name so you can search them a lot easier. Hey, thanks, Ian. I really appreciate the compliment. So Marco, on the stack traces and Christoph, I'd love if you have a little bit more color on this. A lot of times it's catching where that error happens, and if we're throwing an exception, like in this workshop, for example, we're actively throwing it, and so Sentry is looking for where that error is happening. There are times where errors don't like throw in that same way, and it'll show exactly like the query that's the problem. But in this case, the stack trace knows that this is where it's throwing, but it's still inside of the function it's happening at.
Yeah, exactly. There are like cases that are common, like typical would be a network request or any asynchronous things where when the error is thrown or the promise inherently being rejected, we only have stack trace towards the timer inside of the JavaScript engine. So there is, in those cases, usually not that much of a useful information. That's one thing I can think of top of my head. And if you are talking about the code view, like the actual lines and the code preview that we are showing in the stack trace, then in the debug mode, it shows only for the files that are inside of your application, meaning like your own source code. And in releases, it uses the source code that is included inside of the source maps. So there, you should get all that code that was bundled in by Metro.
Love it. Thanks, Christoph. Any other questions? We got about 1 minute left. Well, say this: I'm on Twitter on social, so you can always find me at Cody D Arkland. we love to talk to people. Jump on our Discord, come ask questions there. We're gonna do another larger tracing workshop where we're gonna go very, very deep on tracing in June. We're pretty excited for that one. It's not mobile specific, but it is tracing overall. So come hang out with us, come learn that more. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Hey, shout out to Kyle. Kyle is joining our team. He's in chat right now, so everyone toss Kyle try on a welcome. He's gonna be running one of those modules. He doesn't know it yet, but he just found out. So. All right, y'all. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Definitely fill out the survey. Let us know what you thought about it and how we can make things better. Talk soon, everyone. Have a good one.